I haven't even finished my work. Find a place where no one has to see you.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
A baker is mocked for her scars until a veteran recognizes the unit tattoo. When customers at Sweet Dreams Bakery laughed at Baker Elena Vasquez's burned scars, calling her Frankenstein, she silently endured their cruelty while kneading dough. But when retired Navy SEAL Commander Jake Morrison spotted her faded EOD tattoo, he realized he was looking at the bomb disposal expert who had saved his entire platoon. Sweet Dreams Bakery sat on the corner of Main Street in Riverside, California, its windows always fogged with steam from the ovens and the warm scent of fresh bread drawing customers from blocks away. The small family-owned shop had been struggling since the pandemic, relying on loyal locals and the occasional tourist to stay afloat. Behind the counter, between displays of croissants and wedding cakes, Elena Vasquez worked with the methodical precision of someone who found peace in the rhythm of baking. Her scarred hands moved expertly through dough, creating beauty from simple ingredients while hiding the pain that lived beneath her quiet exterior. Elena had been working at Sweet Dreams for 3 years, arriving before dawn to prepare the day's bread and staying late to clean the ovens. At 32, she carried herself with a careful grace that spoke of someone who had learned to make herself small to avoid drawing attention to the extensive burn scars that covered the left side of her face and neck, disappearing beneath her baker's uniform. The scars were a roadmap of her past, a past she never discussed with her co-workers or the customers who sometimes stared. Mrs. Chen, the bakery's elderly owner, had hired Elena despite her appearance, recognizing skill and dedication when she saw it. Elena's pastries were works of art, her bread perfectly textured and her work ethic unmatched. Before the bakery, Elena had drifted through various jobs: dishwasher, night security guard, warehouse worker, positions where her appearance wouldn't matter, where she could blend into the background. The transition from her previous life had been brutal, filled with surgeries, physical therapy, and the slow, painful process of learning to live with both visible and invisible wounds. What her co-workers didn't know was that Elena's precision with delicate pastry work came from years of handling explosives, where a steady hand meant the difference between life and death. The worst part of Elena's day came during the morning rush, when construction workers from the nearby development project would crowd into the bakery. Led by foreman Rick Morrison, they seemed to take pleasure in making crude comments about Elena's appearance, always just loud enough for her to hear, but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. "Looks like someone left the bread in the oven too long," Rick would snicker, causing his crew to laugh as Elena focused intently on arranging pastries in the display case. The comments cut deep, but Elena had learned to absorb cruelty without reaction, a skill that had served her well in both her military service and civilian life. Elena's day began at 4 a.m., 2 hours before the bakery officially opened. She would unlock the back door, turn on the ovens, and begin the meditative process of preparing the day's bread. The early morning silence was her sanctuary, a time when she could work without fear of judgment or cruel comments. Her hands, despite their scars, moved with remarkable precision as she measured ingredients, kneaded dough, and shaped loaves. Baking had become her therapy, a way to create something beautiful and nourishing from basic elements. Each perfectly risen loaf, each delicate pastry, was a small victory against the chaos that had once defined her life. The routine was interrupted only by the arrival of Mrs. Chen at 5:30, who would greet Elena with a warm smile and a cup of green tea. Mrs. Chen had never asked about Elena's scars, never pried into her past. She simply appreciated Elena's skill and treated her with the dignity that others often denied her. "Good morning, Elena." Mrs. Chen would say, her accent still thick after 40 years in America. "The bread smells wonderful today." These small kindnesses meant more to Elena than Mrs. Chen could ever know. The construction crew arrived like a storm at 7:15 every morning, their boots tracking mud across Mrs. Chen's carefully mopped floors. Rick Morrison, a large man with calloused hands and a cruel streak, seemed to view tormenting Elena as entertainment for his workers. "Hey, Scarface," he would call out loud enough for other customers to hear. "Got any fresh bread, or did you burn that too?" His crew would laugh on cue, their voices echoing off the bakery's tiled walls. Elena would continue working, her jaw clenched, focusing on the orders she needed to fill. She had learned in the military that showing weakness only invited more abuse. "Maybe she should work in the back where customers can't see her," one of the workers suggested during a particularly cruel morning. "Bad for business, you know." Elena felt each comment like a physical blow, but she needed this job. The bakery was one of the few places that had hired her despite her appearance, and Mrs. Chen depended on her. She couldn't afford to lose her temper, couldn't afford to fight back. The other customers would shift uncomfortably during these exchanges, but no one ever intervened. Elena had learned not to expect rescue from strangers. To survive the daily humiliation, Elena had developed a mental escape technique she'd learned during her military service. When the comments became too cruel, she would focus on the technical aspects of her work. The precise temperature needed for perfect croissants, the timing required for sourdough starter, the chemistry of gluten development. Baking was science, and science was predictable. Unlike people, ingredients behaved according to known laws. Flour and water would always combine in the same way yeast would always respond to warmth and sugar, and heat would always transform raw dough into nourishing bread. During her breaks, Elena would step into the alley behind the bakery and roll up her sleeves, revealing more of the scars that covered her arms. Hidden among the burn marks was a small tattoo that most people never noticed. The letters EOD, surrounded by a wreath marking her as a member of one of the military's most dangerous specialties, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. Elena would trace the faded tattoo with her finger, remembering a time when her scars had been badges of honor rather than sources of shame. She had saved lives with these hands, had walked into situations where others feared to go. That woman felt like a stranger now, but the tattoo reminded Elena that she had once been brave. On a Tuesday morning in October, a man Elena had never seen before entered the bakery. He was tall and lean with graying hair and the kind of alert posture that marked him as former military. Unlike the construction workers, he waited patiently in line, studying the display case with genuine interest rather than looking for something to mock. When he reached the counter, he ordered a simple black coffee and a blueberry muffin, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. Elena prepared his order efficiently, keeping her scarred side turned away as much as possible. "Thank you," the man said, his tone respectful. As Elena handed him his change, their hands briefly touched, and she noticed him glance at her forearms where her sleeves had ridden up slightly. The man, whose name tag from the nearby VA clinic identified him as Jake Morrison, found a seat near the window and ate his breakfast while reading a newspaper. Elena noticed that he seemed different from her usual customers, more observant, more respectful. He didn't stare at her scars or make comments to the other patrons. When he left, he placed his empty cup and plate neatly on the counter and thanked Elena again. It was such a small gesture, but it stood out in stark contrast to the treatment she usually received. Jake Morrison became a regular customer, arriving each morning around 8 a.m. after the construction crew had left. He always ordered the same thing, black coffee and whatever pastry Elena recommended, and he always treated her with quiet respect. Unlike other customers, Jake seemed to see Elena as a person rather than a curiosity or target for cruel humor. He would ask about the different pastries, compliment her baking skills, and make polite conversation about the weather or local news. These interactions were brief but meaningful to Elena, who had grown accustomed to being either ignored or mocked. Elena began to look forward to Jake's visits. She would save the best muffins or pastries for him, taking extra care with his coffee. Their conversations remained surface level, but there was an understanding between them that Elena couldn't quite define. She noticed that Jake often wore clothing with military insignia, a Navy SEAL pin on his jacket, a baseball cap with submarine service ribbons, a watch that looked like standard military issue. Elena recognized these markers because she had once worn similar ones back when she was proud of her service rather than haunted by its consequences. Sometimes she caught Jake studying her with an expression she couldn't read, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. The breakthrough came on a particularly difficult morning when the construction crew had been especially cruel. Rick Morrison had made a comment about Elena's scars that was so vicious it had brought tears to her eyes, though she had managed to hide them until the workers left. Jake arrived shortly after taking his usual seat by the window. As Elena prepared his order, her hands were shaking slightly from the emotional aftermath of the morning's abuse. When she set his coffee down, some of it sloshed onto the table. "I'm sorry," Elena said quickly, reaching for a towel to clean up the spill. "Don't apologize," Jake said gently. "Are you okay?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern, nearly broke Elena's composure. She nodded quickly and turned away, but not before Jake caught sight of more of her tattoo as her sleeve shifted. Elena didn't notice Jake's sharp intake of breath or the way his eyes widened with recognition. She was too focused on maintaining her composure on not breaking down in front of a customer. But Jake had seen enough. The partial letters EAOD, combined with the burn scars and Elena's military bearing, had triggered a memory that made his heart race. He knew exactly who Elena was, though she clearly didn't recognize him. That evening, Jake went home and pulled out a box he hadn't opened in years, his military service records and photographs from his deployments. He searched through images from Iraq until he found what he was looking for, a photograph of his SEAL team with the EOD specialist who had saved their lives during a mission in Fallujah. The woman in the photograph was younger, unscarred, and wearing full combat gear, but Jake was certain it was Elena. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, EOD specialist, had been attached to his team for a particularly dangerous mission involving a complex IED network that had been targeting coalition forces. Jake remembered the mission vividly. Elena had worked for 18 straight hours disarming bomb after bomb while under enemy fire. On the final device, something had gone wrong. The IED had partially detonated while Elena was working on it, and she had thrown herself between the explosion and Jake's team, absorbing the blast with her own body. Jake had been unconscious for most of Elena's medical evacuation, and by the time he recovered, she had been transferred to a burn unit in Germany. He had tried to find out what happened to her, but the military bureaucracy had made it impossible to track her down. Now, 15 years later, he had found her working in a bakery, enduring daily humiliation from people who had no idea they were mocking a genuine American hero. The crisis came on a Friday morning when the construction crew arrived in particularly foul moods. A project delay had put them behind schedule, and Rick Morrison seemed determined to take out his frustrations on Elena. His comments started early and grew progressively more vicious. "Hey, Freddy Krueger," Rick called out as Elena arranged pastries in the display case. "Did you make these with your monster hands, or did someone else have to do the actual work?" His crew laughed, emboldened by their foreman's cruelty. Other customers in the bakery shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Elena continued working, her jaw clenched so tightly it ached. "I bet she scares the dough into rising," one of the workers added, causing another round of laughter. Elena's hands began to shake as she tried to focus on her work. The comments were hitting harder than usual, perhaps because she had been thinking more about her military service since Jake's arrival. The contrast between who she had been and who she had become felt especially painful. "Maybe we should find a different bakery," Rick said loudly. "This place is starting to give me nightmares." Elena felt something break inside her. Years of accumulated pain and humiliation reached a breaking point, and she dropped the tray of pastries she was holding. The crash echoed through the bakery, and suddenly everyone was staring at her. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered, kneeling to clean up the mess. "I'm so sorry." Rick Morrison saw Elena's breakdown as an opportunity to escalate his cruelty. "Look at that," he said loudly. "Can't even do her job right. Maybe she should find work where customers don't have to look at her." Elena remained on her knees, picking up broken pastries and trying to hold back tears. The other customers watched in uncomfortable silence, and Mrs. Chen emerged from the back room to see what had happened. "Elena, are you hurt?" Mrs. Chen asked with concern, moving to help clean up the mess. "She's fine," Rick interrupted. "Just clumsy. Maybe you should hire someone who won't scare away your customers." Mrs. Chen's expression hardened. "Sir, I think you should leave." "We're paying customers," Rick replied. "We have a right to be here, but maybe we should take our business somewhere else if this is the kind of service we can expect." Elena stood up slowly, her face burning with shame. She could feel every eye in the bakery on her, could hear the whispered conversation starting among the other customers. This was her worst nightmare, being the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. "I'll work in the back," Elena said quietly to Mrs. Chen. "I don't want to cause any more problems." "You're not the problem here," Mrs. Chen replied firmly, but Elena was already retreating toward the kitchen. As she pushed through the swinging doors, Elena heard Rick's voice one more time. "Finally! Maybe now we can eat in peace without looking at that freak show." The words followed Elena into the kitchen, where she collapsed against the wall and finally allowed the tears to fall. She had endured 3 years of this treatment, But something about today felt different. The humiliation felt complete, total, as if every defense she had built up had crumbled at once. Elena sat on the floor of the bakery's kitchen, surrounded by the tools of her trade, and seriously considered walking out and never coming back. She had saved enough money to last a few months, and maybe it was time to find another job in another town where no one knew her story. The kitchen door swung open, and Elena expected to see Mrs. Chen coming to check on her. Instead, Jake Morrison stepped through, his expression grim and determined. "Elena," he said quietly, "we need to talk." "I'm sorry you had to see that," Elena said, wiping her eyes. "I know it's unprofessional. I'll understand if you don't want to come back." Jake knelt down beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "Elena, do you remember Fallujah, October 2008, the IED network near the marketplace?" Elena's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "How do you know about that?" "Because I was there," Jake said. "Lieutenant Jake Morrison, SEAL Team 5. You saved my life and the lives of my entire team. You threw yourself on that bomb to protect us." Elena stared at him, memories flooding back. The young SEAL lieutenant with the serious eyes and steady hands. The mission that had changed everything. The explosion that had ended her military career and left her with scars that would never fully heal. Elena's mind raced as she looked at Jake with new eyes. The years had changed him, added gray to his hairlines, to his face, and the weight of command to his bearing. But she could see the young lieutenant, now the man she had risked everything to protect. "Jake," she whispered the name, feeling strange after so many years. "I thought the medics said you were unconscious when they evacuated me. I never knew if we made it out alive," Jake finished. "We did, all of us, because of you." Elena shook her head. "I was just doing my job." "Your job was to disarm the bombs, not to use your body as a human shield," Jake replied firmly. "What you did went far beyond duty. You saved 6 lives that day, Elena. 6 Marines and SEALs who went home to their families because you were willing to sacrifice yourself for us." The kitchen door swung open again, and Mrs. Chen appeared, looking concerned. "Elena, are you—" She stopped when she saw Jake kneeling beside Elena, both of them with tears in their eyes. "Mrs. Chen," Jake said, standing up, "I need to tell you something about your baker, and I think the people out there need to hear it too." Elena felt panic rising in her chest. "No, Jake, please. I don't want people to know. I just want to be left alone." "Elena, those men out there are calling you a freak, a monster," Jake said. "They're mocking a woman who earned a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star with V device for valor. They're humiliating someone who saved American lives." "That was a long time ago," Elena protested. "I'm not that person anymore." "Yes, you are," Jake said firmly. "You're still the same brave woman who walked into a minefield to save her brothers in arms. The scars don't change that. If anything, they prove it." Mrs. Chen looked between them, beginning to understand. "Elena, you were a soldier." "She was more than a soldier," Jake said. "She was a hero, and it's time people knew it." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of years of hiding, of shame, of allowing others to define her by her appearance rather than her actions. Jake helped Elena to her feet and looked her directly in the eyes. "I'm going out there, and I'm going to tell them exactly who you are. You can stay here if you want, but I think it's time you stopped hiding." Elena's hands were shaking, but she nodded slowly. "Okay, but I don't know if I can face them." You faced down enemy fire and improvised explosive devices, Jake said. You can face a few ignorant construction workers. Together, they walked back into the main bakery. The construction crew was still there, Rick Morrison holding court with his usual cruel commentary. The other customers were finishing their breakfast, trying to ignore the uncomfortable atmosphere. Jake walked directly to Rick's table, his military bearing unmistakable. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the authority of command. "I need to speak with all of you." Rick looked up with annoyance. "Look, buddy, we're just trying to eat our breakfast. If you've got a problem with something we said—" "I do have a problem," Jake interrupted. "A big one. You've been mocking and humiliating a woman who saved my life." The bakery fell silent as Jake's words sank in. Elena stood behind the counter, her scarred hands gripping the edge for support as Jake continued. "The woman you've been calling names, the woman whose appearance you've been mocking, is Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, United States Army. She's an Explosive Ordnance Disposal specialist who served 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan." Rick's expression shifted from annoyance to confusion. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about October 15, 2008 in Fallujah," Jake said, his voice growing stronger. "My SEAL team was pinned down by enemy fire while Elena worked to disarm a complex IED network. She spent 18 hours under fire disarming bomb after bomb, saving not just our lives, but the lives of hundreds of Iraqi civilians." Jake turned to face the entire bakery, ensuring everyone could hear him. On the final device, something went wrong. The bomb started to detonate while Elena was working on it. She could have run. She could have saved herself. Instead, she threw her body between the explosion and my team. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as Jake continued. "The scars you see, the scars you've been mocking, are the result of Elena using her own body to shield 6 American service members from a bomb blast. She absorbed shrapnel and burns that should have killed her all to save the lives of people she barely knew." The bakery was completely silent now. Rick Morrison's face had gone pale, and his crew members were staring at Elena with expressions of shock and dawning shame. Jake reached into his wallet and pulled out a photograph, the same one he had found the night before. "This is Elena in Iraq before the explosion. She was 24 years old, and she was one of the bravest soldiers I ever served with." He placed the photograph on Rick's table. "She earned a Purple Heart for her wounds and a Bronze Star with V device for valor. She saved 6 lives that day, and the techniques she developed for disarming complex IEDs have saved hundreds more." Jake's voice grew quiet but firm. "So, when you call her names, when you mock her appearance, you're not just hurting a baker. You're insulting an American hero who sacrificed her body and her future to save the lives of her fellow service members." Rick Morrison stood up slowly, his face flushed with shame. He walked to the counter where Elena stood, her head held high for the first time in years. "Ma'am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I'm so sorry. We had no idea." "You shouldn't have needed to know," Elena replied quietly. "Everyone deserves to be treated with basic human dignity." Rick nodded, tears in his eyes. "You're right. There's no excuse for how we treated you, none at all." One by one, the other construction workers approached to apologize, their earlier cruelty replaced by genuine remorse and respect. Word of Elena's story spread quickly through Riverside. By the end of the week, Sweet Dreams Bakery was packed with customers who came not just for the pastries, but to meet the hero who had been hiding in plain sight. Veterans from the local VFW post began gathering there for coffee, creating an informal support network that Elena had never expected. Rick Morrison and his construction crew became some of Elena's most loyal defenders, spreading her story to other job sites and ensuring that anyone who came to the bakery treated her with the respect she deserved. Rick personally funded a display case featuring Elena's military commendations and the photograph Jake had shared. Mrs. Chen, proud of her employees' service, gave Elena a raise and made her a partner in the bakery. "You've been serving this community all along," she told Elena. "Now they know it." The local newspaper ran a feature story about Elena's service, and the mayor proclaimed a Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez Day to honor her sacrifice and service. 6 months later, Sweet Dreams Bakery had become an unofficial veteran center, with Elena organizing monthly gatherings for local service members. She began volunteering at the VA clinic, where Jake worked, using her experience to help other veterans struggling with visible and invisible wounds. Elena's story inspired other veterans in the community to share their own experiences, creating a network of support that helped combat the isolation many felt after leaving military service. She became an advocate for veteran employment, working with local businesses to create opportunities for former service members. The bakery expanded to include a small cafe section where veterans could gather, share stories, and find community. Elena's scars, once a source of shame, became symbols of courage that inspired others to persevere through their own challenges. Jake and Elena developed a close friendship, bonded by their shared experience and commitment to helping other veterans. Their story became a reminder that heroes often hide in plain sight, serving their communities in quiet ways. 1 year after Jake's revelation, Elena stood before a group of young soldiers at the local military base, sharing her story as part of a resilience training program. Her scars were visible, but she no longer tried to hide them. "Your service doesn't end when you take off the uniform," she told the soldiers. "It continues in how you treat others, how you contribute to your community, and how you help your fellow veterans." After her speech, a young female soldier approached her. "Ma'am, thank you for showing us that scars can be badges of honor." Elena smiled finally, understanding that her wounds had always been proof of her courage, not her weakness. They mocked her scars, but those scars told the story of her heroism.